All right, hello, lovely people. This is going to be part two of activities. So if you remember, we just went over the blog post, and now we're moving into the next thing. We're almost done with activities and schedule. This is probably the second of the three different activities, I would say, that needs to be focusing on that mission for the campaign. The story sweepstakes has a thematic tie-in. I do feel like it could have been improved by an example piece of marketing. Um, However, the part I really wanted to focus on is if you can create cross connections between activities, that will increase their credibility and the likelihood that your judge is going to give you a higher score. More specifically, if you have thematic repetition for hashtag March on or hashtag March on Earth, that was your campaign tagline, then this would tie into what showed up in the search engine optimization. Additionally, talking about testimonial and sweepstakes and customer activism and word of mouth is never explicitly truly pointed out. I believe there's the whole user generated content part, but you specifically want to be bringing up different pieces of your content across all the activities. All right, this is the second to last objective, or is it not objective, the second to last piece of activities. There's good detail in the Earth Day boot sales. However, the phrasing for this could be confusing. And we can see this in just sort of the way that, I don't know, it's just the phrasing, just the way that it's presented. It can come across as kind of unprofessional. If I could go back and redo it, I'd make it a little bit cleaner, more concise. Additionally, if you have figs like this, or not figs, if you have images like this where they don't have a set background, instead of just letting it float there, I see a lot of students do this with silhouettes. Add a fig to it, it'll make it look more professional. And then additionally, it can help you cut down on space usage. I have this little piece here. It's very much an ethos appeal. The mossy cobblestones, like the roads historic climate action protests have taken place on, symbolize how far your company has come and how far you will go. That's very much an ethos part. I would even maybe split it at our proposed design, and then I'd put a fig here. That way, even if you don't put a border next to this, the fig is going to make it look a little bit more blocky, a little bit more separated, a bit more corporate. So this was the last activity that I had in my paper, and that is the Doc Mountains Design Contest. It comes from the fact that if you say Dr. Martin's too fast, a lot of people will just start saying Doc Mountains. And I don't know, it's funny. I wanted to share that. The idea is inherently original. You should have one idea per campaign at the absolute minimum that is going to make you stand out. It could be visually, like with the painted pair of boots. I didn't actually end up bringing them to ICDC, but these were virtually painted and I had like a 3D spin around that the judges could see on my presentation. Or it could be unique in the execution, such as a design contest. This was sort of leaning back into that idea of connecting to other activities. This was talking about customers sharing their voice. This was also talking about art, which comes up quite a bit um, in this paper. It's more focusing on the idea of activism as an art, but actually making a visual part of a design process allows you to make it a little bit more concrete. I do feel like I probably should have had an example here. I feel like this was a missed opportunity. As a result, it kind of comes across as unfinished and maybe a little bit underdeveloped. Additionally, I probably would have relabeled this timeline. This is the timeline for the design contest, and it falls right above the schedule, which if this had been further up in the paper, I think that would have been fine. It would have been very obvious that this little timeline here goes to the design contest. However, because it is immediately followed by that schedule, I think it misses that mark a bit. So this is the overall activity score. I got an 11 out of 12, and I would give myself an 8 out of 12, and honestly, that's being generous. The biggest thing for me is that because I didn't have a bunch of examples, I allowed myself to go a bit nuts with how much I was talking about my paper. Even if you listen to me now, you've probably noticed I use a lot of filler. While every student does have the responsibility to go through and edit down their paper. We are inherently biased to think that what we do is perfect the first time around. Easiest way to combat that, aside from going through multiple editing rounds, which I highly suggest, is to add more visuals. Don't just add in visuals for the hell of it. An easy way to do is if you think you've got too much text, first of all, if it's over 6 lines, it's too much text. Second of all, if you go through and you put down a placeholder image block and you put yourself at a hard limit, no more than 6 sentences per paragraph, you'll be able to fill in that image block later. Additionally, if you add in a fig, kind of how there was banding that dark gray or that light gray background to the fig, then we would have allowed it so that later on we can take maybe 2 or 3 of those sentences out from the 6-sentence paragraph and put it into the fig. It breaks everything down, you still get your content across, but you do it in a way that really helps. There's an overall integration of the theme and message into these activities. I'm quite proud of that. However, because it did not include enough of those marking pieces, as I was just saying, it comes across as very text heavy, and that's not referenceable. And I just can't stress it enough. Avoid the long, monotonous walls of text wherever possible. Okay, so this is my schedule. I probably went through a couple dozen different formats for the schedule, honestly. I couldn't find one that I liked. I don't know if I invented this, probably not, because there are no unique thoughts in the world, or where I saw it originally, but I personally really love this format for schedules. It's easy to glance at, you can easily understand the frequency and the general timeline for events. Understanding exact dates can be a little bit difficult, and especially since I didn't put a ton of time and effort into making sure that everything's aligned properly. I probably would have done better with having some vertical lines to make it clearer where things fall. For those who have a visual impairment, this can be a more difficult format to understand, so do keep that in mind. If you are worried about a judge not being able to read it, first of all, that's a very valid worry to have. Second of all, put a vertical bar where an event either ends or do it across every day. I probably would have done it every time there was an ending to an event, or like an ending or a beginning. Additionally, this paragraph of explanation might have been worthwhile to include, just to sort of justify why we go with certain frequencies. I had an entirely separate prop folder, and I will go over that in a separate video, and that explains everything. But since your paper judge is not necessarily going to be your role play, or say your presentation judge, it is better to explain as much as you can as possible in the actual paper too. Don't just rely on a prop folder. I did that, I regret it. I got an 8 out of 8. I'm gonna give myself a 7 out of 8 just because I feel like while it was a very easily referenceable, it's a pretty accessible format, except for that one visual impairment thing I brought up. The design needs to be more precise for clarity. Once again, that visual accessibility thing, it takes a little bit of extra effort to make sure that you're really being aware of that. Additionally, the fact that I excluded a schedule analysis paragraph really does mean that I open myself up for room for failure, room for a judge to be confused. Why did I choose to have influencers post on these dates? Why did I choose to have blog posts only every once in a while? Even more so, why did I choose to exclude certain dates from an activity? While you definitely can have leading questions or information you specifically do not answer in hopes that your judge is going to ask questions about that and you've got a fantastic answer prepared, it's better to do that in the presentation, because with the paper, they can't actually ask those questions. So overall, they would give me an 8 out of 8. I give myself a 7 out of 8 because while it's pretty clear, I think I could have just done better. And then next up is going to be the budget after this video. If I can click the off button.